You know, in winter in Canada, we've lived with snow and ice for so long, sometimes it's tempting to think that this is all we're ever going to experience. We might even forget that it's possible for there to be summer in this country. The thought that these trees might have leaves, or that there would be lakes or beaches that we could lie on and lakes to swim in, just seems a little bit unreal. And so I think it was similar for the Israelites in Egypt when they lived in slavery for so long. Likely they began to forget about the fact that God had promised them freedom, and they began to forget about worshiping God. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 23, it says that the Israelites even began to worship false gods when they were in Egypt. We don't really know why they did this. Maybe they just picked it up from the people that they lived with. But maybe it was because they lost hope, that they had lived in slavery for so long, they began to doubt the promises that God had given them. And they began to doubt God, and so they started worshiping other gods in the area. But despite these faults, despite the fact that they began worshiping other gods, God heard their cry, and he decided to deliver them from slavery. He honored the promise that he'd made to Abraham those years before. And that's encouraging for us, because it lets us know that when God makes a promise to us, he will honor it also. And it also lets us know that just as God heard the cries of the Israelites and cared about them, that God hears our cries too, and our frustrations and our fears and our worries, and he cares about those as well, and he wants to deliver us from that also. So the symbol that we have for this last day is parsley and salt water. This salt water represents the tears of the Israelites as they were in bondage in Egypt. And this symbol comes right from the Passover meal itself, where as part of the meal, you dip parsley in salt water and taste it, remembering the tears of the people of Israel as they were slaves in Egypt. There's a couple Bible readings that we have for today as well, and I'll read those for you now. This is from Exodus chapter 1. It talks about how the Israelites became slaves in the first place. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians became ruthless in imposing tasks on the Israelites and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in every kind of field labor. They were ruthless in all the tasks they imposed on them. Then this is from Exodus chapter 2. It talks about the beginning of the deliverance. And the beginning of the deliverance came from the prayers of the Israelites. Exodus 2, 23 to 25. After a long time, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned under their slavery and cried out. Out of the slavery, their cry for help rose up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. One more thing. Even though during their difficulties to the Israelites, it seemed that they weren't being paid for their work, in God's timing, they were actually just accumulating wages. God actually had promised Abraham long before that when his descendants would leave Egypt, they would leave with great possessions. This was all the back pay that the Israelites had accumulated during their time as slaves. The Egyptians, I'm sure, would have forgotten about this. The Israelites, too, would have likely forgotten, but God didn't forget. God acted to bring about justice for his people. And that meant they'd even be paid for the work that they'd done and their ancestors had done when they were in Egypt. And I think this is one of the hopeful parts of the story for us. We're God's people too. And in the same way, we can count on God to work about justice in our lives and the situations that concern us. If we don't see it happen right away, maybe it's going to happen a bit later on, and if not here on earth, then definitely in heaven.